Hey Year 11s, we're back looking at the dinosaur paper from the November series 2018, and today we're going to have a really close look at question 4. And what I'm going to do with you for question 4 is just remodel again how to break down the question, how to divide up your time, and how to use the C's structure for evaluating the statement that the student makes. So first of all, let's have a look at what question 4 looks like and think about that first. So for question 4, it says, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from lines 31 to the end. So that's particularly important in this paper, and I'll explain why in a second. Here's the statement itself, and it's always this fake student who makes up a statement for you to get to grips with. A student said, this part of the story where the men encounter the Tyrannosaurus Rex shows Eccles is right to panic. The monster is terrifying. To what extent do you agree? So you're going to fully agree, partially agree, disagree, or partially disagree. Those are 4 useful statements. Somewhat I also use as well, somewhat disagree or somewhat agree with the statement. And what you'll find is a lot of the statements you will want to agree with, and that's kind of why they word it like that. So most of the statement you'll probably want to agree with, but other parts of the statement you might get a bit more of a discussion and more of an evaluation going. Let's have a look at the bullet points. In your response, you could consider your own impression of Eccles' reaction to the T-Rex. So that's one thing to look at. You could evaluate how the writer describes the monster. And finally, you must support your response with references to the text. And the best way to do that is by using quotations. And this is a really big mark question. It's worth 20 marks. So when you're doing your GCSE paper, and you're thinking about managing your marks and managing your time, this is definitely not a question that you want to skip out on or skip over. Even if you only write a paragraph for this one, it is better to try and pick up 5 or 6 easy marks, just saying whether you agree or disagree with an aspect of that statement, than to just ignore that question, move on, because this is a bit challenging. Believe me, I see and have marked hundreds of GCSE papers, and there's still a lot of students skipping over question 4 and spending hours and hours on question 2 and 3, which are only out of 8. Please don't skip out on question 4. The other lovely thing about question 4 is because it is to what extent do you agree and disagree, you actually get the opportunity to give your own opinion based on what you've read. And that's a really lovely thing to be able to do. And for me as an examiner, that's a lovely thing for me to be able to mark, saying that you've got an opinion and that you can back it up by justifying it by looking at evidence from the text. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing to think about is this statement that the fake student says. So here it is. We can break it into 2 parts, and I've highlighted these in different colours. Eccles is right to panic. That's the first part of the statement. The monster is terrifying, and that's the second part of the statement. And about half an hour ago, I taught this lesson live to my own class of Year 11 students, my main Year 11 group. And I asked them in the chat box to do a vote for me which part of the statement they thought was the most tricky, which is most difficult bit of the statement. And actually it was about half and half. About half of them thought that it's easier to argue that the monster is terrifying, and the other half of them thought it was easy to answer the part of the question, Eccles is right to panic. And I was quite shocked, because to me, the monster is terrifying, basically being able to pick out more language, very much like question 2, and do kind of slightly expanded PEA paragraphs, basically turning your PEAs into Cs paragraphs here, arguing that yes, of course, a monster is terrifying. To me, that's really easy. But then I realised that a lot of you guys actually don't really like zooming in on the effects of language. You find that really difficult, and you find it quite boring. Whereas actually thinking in a much more argumentative way about is Eccles right to panic? Yes, he is, but no, he's not. And actually getting your teeth into that much more interesting part of the statement actually is something that you prefer to do. So yeah, definitely some of you will find this one, which is leading you much more to language analysis, you'll find that much easier. Whereas this part of the statement, some of you prefer that, where you can actually get to grips with the statement and disagree with it a little bit as well. So you don't get more marks for doing one or the other and focusing on one more than the other. But definitely if you can do a balanced answer where you talk about both parts of the statement quite easily, maybe even link those two parts together, that's what's going to get you into the highest bands on this one. So before we move on, let's just revise this mnemonic, this memory jogger. So C's stands for statement, and you're going to have a look at one or other parts of the statement and say to what extent you agree or disagree with it. So that's a really nice, easy start to this question. That should settle you into it quite nicely. E for evidence, it's like the third bullet point, support your response with references to the text. So if you are talking about language, pick out a quotation, and for the evidence section, the quotation might be a little bit longer, or the quotation might be a couple of points taken from different parts of the text. Or when we look at the monster one, you'll see I've used the old trick of ellipsis. It was quite a long quotation, and I've cut out the unnecessary bits by using the magic dots, dot, 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 so that I don't have to just keep copying pages and pages down. What we're going to do after we've popped in our evidence is we're going to say, what does this mean? What does this suggest? So our inference is using our knowledge of how the world works, the outside world works, and to give some kind of perspective and some kind of context to what we're reading, to explain what's going on and what it means, what the writer's trying to get to. Then what I'm going to do, because one of the bullet points in the mark scheme for this is methods and being able to analyse methods, we're going to zoom in on some of the language. Okay, so zooming in on the language, and then finally we're going to be trying to link it all back to this statement here, to evaluate. So we look back at what we've said and we're going to say why that proves that we agree with the statement, or why does everything we've said prove that we disagree with the statement. So we're almost kind of linking it back and summarizing what we've said just here. So let's have a look at lines 31 to the end. And I said earlier, it's really, really important that you stick to these lines. And that's really because of this part of the statement. The monster is terrifying. Do you agree? And you probably will agree. But what you really don't want to do is accidentally use the wrong lines and virtually repeat the answer that you gave for question 2. Because on this particular exam paper, question 2 and question 4 are very similar. Question 2 is like, how does the writer use language to write about the monster? And here it said, do you agree that the monster is terrifying? You can see it's really close. So if you accidentally use the wrong bit and end up rewriting your question 2 answer, you get 0 for writing about the wrong section. You must stick to what it says here. Having said that, many of the same ideas that were established in question 2 are kind of repeated here. So the watchmaker's claws, the stone eyes, the beast being like a warrior, all those ideas are referred to again. So you can use similar analysis, but you need to use new evidence from the correct section. So what you might want to do now is pause the video. The links to this exam paper are in the description underneath. Obviously, if you're working at school, it'll be in the assignment that I have set, but the links are underneath. So if you want to look at that and print it out and annotate it, you can do so. If not, just read through this section and think about where it talks about the monster, and whether you agree, disagree, somewhat agree or somewhat disagree that the monster is presented as terrifying in this section. So read through it and see if you can annotate the best quotations to show that the monster is terrifying. Okay, you can have a look here and you can see where I have annotated. And to see that the monster is terrifying is in two main sections. That's this little paragraph here. So the Tyrant Lizard raised itself, its armored flesh glittered like 1,000 green coins, coins crusted with slime steamed. In the slime, tiny insects wriggled, so the entire body seemed to twitch and undulate, even while the monster itself did not move. It exhaled, the stink of raw flesh blew down on the wilderness. And this whole section at the end, the monster lunged forward with a terrible scream. It covered 100 yards in 6 seconds. The rifles jerked up and blazed fire. A windstorm from the beast's mouth engulfed them in a stench of slime and old blood. The monster roared, teeth glittering with the sun. The rifles cracked again, but the sound was lost in the shriek and lizard thunder. The great level of the reptile's tail swung up and lashed sideways. Trees exploded into clouds of leaf and branch. The monster twitched its jeweler's hands down to fondle at the men, to twist them in half, to crush them like berries, to cram them into its teeth. And its screaming throat, its boulder stone eyes levelled with the men. They saw themselves mirrored. They fired at the metallic eyelids and the blazing black iris, like a stone idol, like a mountain avalanche. Tyrannosaurus fell. So those are the quotations I picked out. There is no way in 20 minutes that you have to write this answer. You can write about all of those. You're going to have to be really selective. And you can see just down here, I've written challenge. Which language device or which point that you want to make could be considered perceptive. So if you're aiming for those highest marks, be careful to think, could I make a really perceptive point about this, or is it just going to be clear? Look for opportunities to make a perceptive point. I'm just going to go through one or two of the things that I've annotated here. So the first one, the Tyrant Lizard, is a really nice short one. Think about what tyrant means. A tyrant is a brutal leader, someone like Saddam Hussein. Someone like Hitler is a tyrant. He doesn't let his people have a choice in what he does. So the Tyrant Lizard. Think about the connotations of the word tyrant there. If you don't know what tyrant means, skip it, move on. I like this physical description here. Its armoured flesh glittered like 1,000 green coins. So you've got the idea of armoured, that the monster is terrifying because it's so hard to penetrate its scaly skin. Glittered has connotations of wealth and royalty, and so does coins, like treasure. So it's kind of suggesting the monster is terrifying because it almost has that power and status of something wealthy and royal. Plus the fact that it's armoured, like I said, means it's difficult to penetrate. And the idea of the coins here is suggesting it's disguised with metal, which again makes it harder still to penetrate. In this little bit here in the slime, tiny insects wriggled. And this is the one I thought you could make a really, really perceptive and deep point on if you develop your idea. This idea that the monster is like a ruler or even god-like from earlier in the text, so developing that theme, it's almost as if this monster's body supports a whole ecosystem in which these tiny insects can live. But we can take that further. It's almost as if he is God to these tiny insects, as if these tiny insects are somehow his minions. And this idea that this monster is like godlike and almost like a whole world to a colony of insects who are his minions and would do his command is quite a terrifying image, and I think that's quite a perceptive point. And then we've got this bit down here, the stink of raw flesh blew down the wilderness, and that links with another point down here somewhere. The beast's mouth engulfed them in a stench of slime and old blood. So you could possibly link those together. So you've got the raw flesh here and the old blood here. Both of those serve to remind us that this beast is a predator and it's a carnivore that survives on eating things that are alive, such as these human hunters, which, with its lizard jewel maker's hands, is treating like a little snack, almost like a bag of crisps, these human hunters here, to fondle them in, to twist them in half, to crush them like berries, to cram them into its teeth, into its screaming throat. So that kind of leads on to this quotation. Then you can look at this quotation separately. The delicacy of the beast that has got hands that can manipulate small things, make it even more of a threat. And then looking at the language device here, you have a list of infinitive verbs: to twist, to crush, to cram, and it is using that rhetorical device of incrementum. It's an incremental list. Each thing that the beast can possibly do to these men gets slightly worse each time, until the men could possibly end up down the beast's throat. So again, that's a really strong point there. We talked about the stone eyes when we did question 2. It's soulless. It has no emotion towards these men. Therefore, it doesn't think twice about eating this fresh snack. So we've got loads and loads going on there. Now, I've done a model paragraph for you to demonstrate the C's structure in action. So here's my statement. I fully agree with the student when they say the monster is terrifying. It is both powerful and fast. Adding this in, this is like an overview. That's a bit optional. You wouldn't need to put that in, but it shows where I'm going with my paragraph. I'm going to put some evidence in. First, the writer describes how it lunged forward with a terrible scream, which implies it is coming for the hunters. Okay, so there's my inference. So statement, evidence, inference. This implies it's coming for the hunters. Nothing really magical or special going on in that inference there. The verb lunged, so I'm zooming in now on a couple of the words, suggests a certain clumsiness and heaviness. I haven't written it here, but quite often you say, if, like in football, if someone lunges in for a challenge, you know that they're out of control of it. That's like the connotative meaning of lunge, isn't it? When you're lunging, there's some clumsiness associated, and I explained that when I zoom in. A certain clumsiness and heaviness in its movements, while the noun phrase, a terrible scream, indicates how the monster can evoke fear in man. So remember that terrible means terrifying. It can create terror. It's slightly different here, although terrible can mean it's horrible as well. It's almost like the battle cry of a warrior to which it has previously been compared. Okay, so I'm linking back in the extract. So it has been described as a warrior, and a warrior will give out a scream or a battle cry before it goes to battle. However, this loud, clumsy beast is then described, so I'm zooming in some more, but I've got to lay down some more evidence here, is then described as moving at pace, covering 100 yards in 6 seconds. So it's kind of almost like I've done a little inference, dropped in some evidence. Now I'm going to zoom in, revealing that despite its size and apparent clumsiness, the creature is lithe, fast and athletic. So really zooming in on the pace that it's moving out there, and could catch up with the hunters in an instant. Now I'm going to step back and evaluate that whole effect. So I'm not just zooming in on the language, I'm thinking structurally how that's working too. This juxtaposition of the description of the monster's ungainliness with, I should say, its pure pace truly heightens how terrifying the monster is. So you see, to evaluate, I've said, well, yeah, I've looked at how its clumsiness is put next to its speed. And when you put those two things together, you've got a creature which is really quite invincible. And I've linked that with that word terrifying back to the student's statement. So I would say that this paragraph shows some good analysis. We've got some strong methods in there. We've got some really well explained evaluation. And if I did maybe 3 more paragraphs about this level, it would definitely be at the top of level 3 on the mark scheme. And because it is quite detailed, it might even get into the bottom of level 4 because of its detail. However, I haven't chosen a perceptive point to write about there, and that's why it wouldn't get into level 4 for being perceptive. It's very, very clear and arguably very detailed, especially if I wrote 3 further paragraphs at a similar level to that. Okay, so sneaking in perhaps to the bottom of level 4 if I could sustain that kind of work within the 20 minutes. Right, let's have a little look at the second part of the statement now. Eccles is right to panic. So again, do you agree or disagree that he's right to panic? Pause the video for a moment and find the bits where we see Eccles panicking and think about, well, is he right to panic? Do you somewhat agree or do you disagree that he's wrong to panic? Have a look and see what you can think. And remember that first bullet point from the question. Consider your own impressions of Eccles' reaction to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So that's what we're looking at. Does he panic? To what extent does he panic? Pause it, have a little read through and an annotate. Okay, these are some of the points that I picked out. So it's kind of obviously is everything that I didn't annotate for the other part of the statement in a way. So if we have a look here, I've got a few things going on. It can't be killed. Eccles pronounces verdict quietly as if there could be no argument. So here, I'll probably disagree with the student because I disagree with the student saying that he's not even panicking. He's just stating facts as he sees it. He seems quite rational. He had weighed the evidence and this was his considered opinion. So he's not panicking. He's being rational. He's looking at the size of his gun. There's no sense of panic. So I disagree with the student there. I'd say, well, no, it's not right to panic because he's not panicking. He's coming to a rational decision when he carefully weighs up the evidence in front of him. So that's the first thing that I'd say I disagree with the student there, probably. However, go down to the next thing that I have highlighted in green. There's the red paint on its chest. Remember, it's a time machine from the blurb in the box. So this T-Rex has already been marked out by the team, the time traveling team, for destruction. It's got red paint on its chest. So maybe now we think, well, no, he's not right to panic. So I'm disagreeing again with the student, but for a really different reason here. He's not right to panic because clearly someone's already been back to the past and marked out this dinosaur for destruction. So no, he shouldn't be panicking. This team knows what it's doing. However, when Eccles starts to say it can't be killed, he doesn't get a rational response. Look at the way the members of the team, the guides, talk to him. Shut up, hissed Travis. Turn around, commanded Travis. And down here, don't run, said Lesperance. So maybe he is right to panic. These guys don't seem to be in control. They don't talk to Eccles in a nice way to try and reassure him. They don't say to him, it's all right. We know that the T-Rex is going to die anyway, and that's why we put the red paint on its chest. Stop panicking. You're fine. You're fine. Honestly, we know what we're doing. They don't say that. Instead, they insult him. Shut up, turn around, don't run. So he's also getting mixed messages. Travis is telling him to go back to the time machine. Lesperance is telling him not to run back to, which one is it? So maybe then he is right to panic because Travis and Lesperance, the guides, don't know what they're doing. And then if we have a look at what Eccles says, his panic is rising a little bit. He says it was never like this before. And you really, really need to dig for your inference here. Eccles says, I had good guides before. He's talking about here. I had good guides before, good safaris and safety. Eccles is thinking back to when he's been on safari before, and he's praising the guides, good safaris, safety. He's saying that's what happened to him before. He's kind of suggesting that he doesn't have confidence in these guides now. He said, before I had good guides, now I don't think that I have good guides, not so much now. I don't think this is good safari safety. So again, that could mean that you agree with the statement here, or somewhat agree with the statement. Yeah, Lesperance and Travis are being rude and they're not explaining kindly to Eccles. And Eccles doesn't think that they're good guides. We can work that out through inference there. And then Eccles, however, could be wrong to panic here. He says, I didn't realize it would be this big. This kind of suggests to me, so again, lots of inference in this one, that Eccles hasn't done his homework properly. He's just jumped like an excited kid into this safari without even learning how big a T-Rex is, what the threat and what the challenge is going to be. So perhaps if he had done his homework properly and he knew what kind of beast he was coming up against, then he might have been more prepared and then he wouldn't have panicked. So there, again, I'm disagreeing with the student, because if Eccles had done his homework properly, he would have known what to expect and then he wouldn't have needed to panic. Okay? And there's different interpretations to what I've said. The fact that Travis is hissing and going, shut up, and the fact that Lesperance is saying, don't run, that could show that they're panicking too. And if the guides are panicking, that could show that Eccles is right to panic if they're not in control. Okay, so as I said earlier, I love this question because it's very much about what you think. You can take the evidence I've given you to say I disagree with the student and actually use that evidence to agree with the student instead. It's totally up to you. However, I have done a model paragraph for you. And I kind of worked on this with my class earlier as well. So see what you think of this paragraph that we did. So I disagree with the student when they say Eccles is right to panic, because I don't believe Eccles has control over his panic. Okay, so there's your statement. And I've put that kind of overall thing in there again. Here's my evidence. He seemed to be numb. He cannot make his feet move, and he gives a grunt of helplessness. So I've used these bits here that I didn't talk you through a minute ago because I've done the paragraph. I'm going to do my inference now, and this is quite a good deep inference because I'm using my scientific knowledge, my science studies knowledge, my knowledge of how the world works. I think I said to my class earlier, my cat likes catching mice and birds, and I've seen her prey do this as well. So this lack of action and inability to move implies Eccles has been taken over by an adrenaline rush. But it's not fight or flight. He's gone into freeze mode. Okay, so if you do your PE studies or your biology, you'll know that adrenaline has the effect of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And Eccles is basically, his body is told him to play dead. His body is shut down and it doesn't want to move, like quite often the birds and mice that my cat catch do as well. He's gone into freeze mode. That's what's happened to him. That's my inference from the evidence here. I'm going to zoom in. The adjective numb and the verb move highlight how he is stuck to the spot. So you'll see here I haven't done that much with the language. It's not really rich language. I'm more relying on this question for my inference to argue and evaluate the statement, and that is fine. You need to do a bit of both. It's not a case of whether he's right or wrong to panic. So I'm evaluating and linking it back to the statement. It's not a case of whether he's right or wrong to panic. He just does. Like his body takes over. His body takes over and he has no control over himself. Okay, so you see why I'm disagreeing with the student. I was saying, like, the fact that he's right to panic suggests he has a choice in the matter. I'm arguing here he doesn't have a choice. His body's just decided what it's going to do because he gets struck by adrenaline just here. Okay, so that's the one that we did in class together. And again, I hope you can see how we've really used that C's structure. In this one, not that one, and that one, we've really done a lot of zooming in onto the methods used, structure and language. And in this one, we've relied more on our use of inference and really getting into the statement, really getting into evaluating the statement. And it's really good to do a combination of those, but you must do methods, otherwise you will lose marks. Okay, but sometimes you don't have to do much with the methods to still make your point. So what I want you guys to do for me, please, is to have a go at writing an answer to this question. So time yourself for 20 minutes. And I want you to have a go at writing 2 fresh C's paragraphs about whether you agree that the monster is terrifying. Write then 2 paragraphs about what extent you agree that Eccles was right to panic. Use the C structure to help you. And what I've done underneath here is I've given you 2 scaffolds to help you word your C's paragraphs. Okay, the first one for the monster, I've just left it as fully agree. If you want to disagree that the monster is terrifying, you go for your life, but I wouldn't suggest it. And you can just read through that and just kind of fill in the blanks. And the same thing here, but I've given you some options to cross out in this one. So it's probably going to be partially or somewhat agree or disagree on the second one, I would suggest. What you might want to do now is do a screen grab of this if you need those scaffolds to help you. Or you can just pause the video if you're lucky enough to have 2 screens, or you've got this on your phone and you're going to type on your laptop or something. You can just pause this and have a go and see how much you can manage in 20 minutes. So good luck with that, and I'll see you next time where we're going to be thinking about the writing section on this paper. Bye.